Well, as we're in the midst of South by Southwest here in Austin, Texas, I thought it was appropriate we have our own panel. And frankly, we could name this panel, How Did That Happen? Or How is that possible? Or perhaps simply That Escalated Quickly. Lincoln Rose with you as again, joined by a fantastic group who I think, even though we're not going to be able to dive as deeply as we'd probably like on each of these topics, this is the perfect group to help us at least scratch the surface. We've got Gaby Navarro, who's president of Los Verdes, as well as a member of La Murga de Austin. We've got Landon Cotham, who is co-host of the popular podcast for Moontower Soccer, as well as a member of Los Verdes, and the president of Austin Anthem, the original supporters group here in Austin, Tony Cardone, who received the torch as it was passed to him from Josh Babetsky this past season. Great to have you all with us. Again, we want to get in much time as possible. Let's just dive right in with each of you sharing with us your first exposure to supporters culture. I know that's a very broad term, but perhaps what first lit that spark in you to eventually become a part of it here in Austin? Gaby?
I think my first exposure was Roberto, and that's already a wild exposure into the Austin soccer community, just with how involved he is and everything. But one thing led to another, from the announcement into engaging some of the people that were there at that announcement initially. I think that's really where it sparked a lot of interest in me, is that so many people were already so dedicated. I mean, even when I showed up, right, like the music was there was already Anthem there. There was multiple people who were very welcoming. And that for me was like, okay, I want to be a part of this.
Well, we're certainly going to dive into that music element. That's a big part of the heartbeat of Q2 Stadium. But Landon, what is your unique story?
So I had never actually had any friends to watch soccer with. I grew up in the Texas Panhandle, lived in Lubbock, Texas for 7 years during college and a bit afterwards, and really only had a couple of friends that even liked soccer. And so I lived in Spain for a few years, decided to come back to the States, and ended up in Austin. So when I got to Austin, I decided I'm going to find a soccer community here. It's like one of my favorite things in the world, and I almost only ever watch it alone. And so kind of started putting together trying to figure out different ways to kind of find that soccer community. And as I was like putting myself out there, I created a meetup group for like soccer newbies to try to get together and learn the game of soccer. And that's how the folks at Austin, or the group that became Austin Anthem, found me actually through that group that I created. And so they reached out to me and said, hey, we're trying to bring an MLS team to Austin. If you want to come hang out with other idiots like yourself, then we'll be here on this date. And that was kind of how I fell into the whole MLS and Austin group.
And finally, Tony, I know for those who don't, you have a brother who plays professional soccer. You've been also a big part of social media for Austin Anthem. This all seems to be a perfect marriage for you, but is there anything else we're overlooking with regards to your first exposure to the sport and why you're so involved today?
Yeah, obviously you covered the fact that my brother and really all of my siblings are better athletes than I am. So thank you for that, Lincoln. But I'm also 6'4" and wasn't ever good at basketball. So soccer kind of naturally jumped in there. And I played it growing up as well. I moved off to college, kind of kept up with the game a little bit. You know, friends, we played FIFA. I think that was the college game of choice for a lot of us. A lot of people got their access to the game. And then I moved around and ended up in Austin. And I also have a pretty keen appreciation of politics. And when City Hall happened, it kind of was the perfect center of the Venn diagram with Austin would be great with a soccer team. And here's a city government trying to do stuff with some exciting results, I think is one way to put those 2 a.m. meetings.
Well, Tony, you talked about one of the things I wanted to dive into. Even before there was Austin FC, you all were already boots on the ground, very involved. Instead of cheering on match days, cheering at city council. Before you had season tickets at Q2, I'm pretty sure you had really good box seats at those city council meetings. What inspired you, and what did you take from that experience? How much more invested do you feel with the team, having been here before the arrival of Austin FC?
Well, for sure, those season tickets to City Hall are much cheaper than anything at Q2. But I think, there was a large group of people there when I joined the organization. So, I was just kind of year 3 or 4 of what they had been working on. And to kind of see it kind of I guess you rarely get to see something be born really in front of your eyes. Like you can see the buildup sometimes, you can see the announcements, but to kind of live through it, I think gives everyone a sense of like ownership of the team. Like we all want to see this be successful, and I think it gives us a big picture look at some of the supporters culture in Austin. We're like, these small things may not matter. This is something that we worked for years and years with a whole bunch of different people, and just be part of it really is really cool.
Yeah, it was clear that Austin Anthem had a presence before the arrival of the new club. Gaby, La Murga de Austin did not wait to debut at Q2 Stadium. You all were over at the track stadium cheering on the University of Texas women's program, among other programs around the area. And I'll just point out, I've called plenty of college soccer matches. It is a unique environment. The moment that you all brought the drums and that kind of energy, what a great soundtrack. It really changed the environment. I know Ange Kelly at Texas would agree, but why? Why did you show up to those matches and feel like you needed to help inject some of that energy?
I think there was multiple reasons, right? Like, I think one was just sharing our love for music and the culture that it creates in a soccer environment, and especially for the women's team. They were, already in well-standing, and had a good program there at UT. And for us, it was like, aside from doing our band practice at the park or, sometimes at the gravel parking lot of the stadium, this was honestly a good opportunity for us to get ready for a game day. Our team wasn't there whenever we started playing at UT, and not only like just to support women's soccer and everything, but also to create that foundation of who La Murga is and what we do and the culture that we bring to the game. I think that was really important to share that with teams that were already out there, right? I mean, we even went out to academy at one point and welcomed the new players, right? These kids that for the first time are a part of the team, right? The first initial true team to Austin FC. And so to be a part of the community and bring that, I think was like, hey, this is what we are going to bring to McCalla, right? And to Austin FC. And then second of all, in the hopes of one, like we were going to recruit new members, and two, we would instill some sort of like want for other kids, whether they're college kids or, middle school or high school kids, or just any age of kids that wanted to have that interest in playing. Now they could essentially come join a band of folks that were already bringing the noise to Austin.
And Landon, again, you're still hosting Moontower Soccer. I say still hosting because during the pandemic, I think everybody had at least 2 or 3 podcasts that they were trying to get up off the ground, whether it be about their dog or what they were binge watching. But over the past few years and throughout this first season of Austin FC, I think a few podcasts have really found their voice, really found an audience. What has it been for you and your co-host, Jeremiah Bentley, that you believe keeps you all motivated producing episodes from one week to the next?
I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say at least part of it was the attention we get from it. But I don't know, seriously, like I've been listening to podcasts for, I don't know, as long as you could really listen to podcasts, and was always just a really big fan of it. And whenever the opportunity arose to be a part of one, when we started off doing the Austin Anthem podcast and eventually created our own podcast, which is Moontower Soccer, it kind of like was a thing that combined my 2 loves, which is audio production and then having a love of listening to podcasts, and then be able to do both of those things while talking about soccer. And so it's just a lot of the things that I love. But you're right. Like I always tell people that making a podcast is easy. Like it's not very expensive. It's not actually that hard to do, but doing it consistently and at least trying to make it quality every week is where the difficulty comes in, and especially in a season where the team is maybe not so good that you're covering.
Yeah, certainly appreciate those who stick to it. I remember watching some other MLS clubs who are transitioning to MLS. Minnesota stands out in my mind. I always thought of them as not just the team of 10,000 lakes, but the team of 10,000 podcasts, as everybody had their twist on soccer. But it's great to see in Austin several, again, different voices emerging, each with unique audiences and some crossover, be able to have those platforms and in their own way help grow the team. Gabby, back to La Murga de Austin. I think it is safe to say when a lot of kids show up to their first match at Q2 Stadium, they probably spend more than 90 minutes looking to the south end at the folks jumping around, having a good time, looking as if, again, they're having the party of their lives over there in La Murga than they do at the professional athletes running up and down the pitch, competing at a world-class level. But when it comes to your peers, what's your background in music? And give us an example of maybe the extremes, somebody who picked up an instrument for the first time and somebody who might be performing somewhere on any other given Friday or Saturday night.
Well, for me, I think personally, like I had never picked up a snare. Like I knew absolutely nothing. I don't know how to read music, and it's just, I was definitely beginner. Like if somebody comes by and say, I want to be a part of Murga, and I know very little about the instrument, we would welcome them, right? Because myself, compared to some of the people that are part of Murga, right? We have like people who do this for a living, whether it's music teachers, whether they're performers or whatever. Like some of these folks are absolutely incredible at playing just instruments in general. So it was nice to start something that was very much so you don't need to know anything, and I'm like X level, person here. So it was really nice, and I think it's still something that we have made sure to keep and make it a part of Murga, is that everybody is welcome, right? Whether it's you're really good at it or you're just beginning.
Tony, I think one thing that's made this so special so far is the welcoming culture of the Austin fan groups, of new members, of folks who have questions, new to the sport. How much of that is Austin, Texas, and how much of that is soccer culture as a whole?
Yeah, I think if you kind of look at the genesis of Austin SC, we're tied to Columbus, and we were kind of given this like bad guy vibe, I think, right out of the gate, where it's like, oh, we're trying to pick the team. And then I think people, and some of the national media came down to Austin as it showed up, was like, these guys would love to see Columbus keep their team. We just want to have our own soccer community. We want to build it our way. We want to build it from scratch. And, I think they were surprised to see that we're actually very nice people, because you kind of get out of the bubble. And, I think most Texans are very nice people, and Austinites in particular, we're very friendly. I think it's part of the culture of Austin with pickup soccer, with Zilker Park, with, all these events we have going around the city throughout the year. I think there's just something unique about Austin that we were able to kind of capture with the soccer community. And, it's hard to just say, oh, go out and be part of the community, but you kind of have to realize that these are people you would probably never meet without going to a soccer game, without being part of something bigger than that. And I think it's really cool to see Austin growing in this way, kind of alongside the soccer community.
I'm about as close to a lifelong Austinite as you can be. I did step out of town for college, but I was born at St. David's, grew up here, went to Austin High. I'm mindful that each of you has different stories of what brought you to Austin. But what I love is this might be one of the things you all have in common. A club comes to town, it brings you all under one roof, where otherwise maybe you wouldn't cross paths. Landon, we talked about a soccer community that embraces, but it's not just soccer related causes. We've seen the supporters during the freeze last year get behind some of the athletes and their causes, as well as other charitable efforts as well. How important have you seen that be in continuing to grow the game kind of as ambassadors to those in need?
Yeah, I mean, that's been honestly the best part of all of this, is the community aspect of it. Like the team could disappear tomorrow, and this group of people that we've created around the team, I think, would stay together just because of kind of the bonding moments we've had over the last few years. And so I think the supporters groups, no telling how many tens of thousands of dollars have been raised for charities over the last couple of years. The different community outreach things, volunteering, all of that kind of stuff has happened because of this community that's formed. And so I think it's part of growing the game, but then also part of the game giving back to the community that's allowing this team to be here.
For the national audience, of course, they noticed La Murga, they noticed the 3,000 fans screaming on the south end. I think the next most noticeable thing is the TIFO on the nights that is raised. The three obviously painted TIFO stand out, really reflecting the artist culture, the presence that exists in Austin. It's an embarrassment of riches when it comes to talents. But again, it's not just La Murga that has some novices. I know you all have put in time with a few coats of paint as well on those. So let's dive a little bit into just how much time and effort it takes to put one of those together. Of course, the first one, the opening of Q2 Stadium, the Legends of Austin. Later in the summer, we saw Selena. And of course, this year, the postcard with all the great memories from last year. Gaby, when you think about TIFO, take us from start to finish. What's the typical timeline? How far out in advance does that planning require?
So man, it takes a long time, right? Like the first one, we are getting better as time goes, but I can easily say that the first one probably took like 2-3 months just of planning. And then the actual execution of it probably took about a month and over, I don't know, 300-400 volunteers and just hundreds of hours. It's what it felt like, at least. And it was just, from the design to, I think initially we start with just throwing out ideas and then, picking some of the top ideas we have and then working on the design, right? And what we like to do on our end is not only work with the artist, within our soccer community, but also muralist within Austin, artist, people that, that do this for a living. And, I don't know, I think for me, it's like important that they're a part of this because they're soccer fans too. A lot of these gentlemen that we've worked with, which is Luis, he's from Venezuela and he loves soccer, right? And you have Fabian Rey, who is also, super into soccer, that hasn't worked on a TIFO with us yet, but has been a part of our community and part of Austin. So just building those relationships is important for us. And so anyways, back to the TIFO is just, finding the material that we need for it, setting time aside to find somebody that can help us sew it and get it ready, right? And then looking at the dimensions of this and seeing what we can work with and how the art best fits. And then just, doing the tracing of, the, how do you call it? The grid of this to then do the tracing and, reaching out to people for help is just, it's such a crazy thing that goes on in between all this because it's like a million pieces, that go into this. And just thankfully, like between the soccer community, we have plenty of volunteers who have dedicated so much time. You have to find when also the muralists can come out and work with us on tracing, helping us trace so we're not like making stick figures out there. Yeah. And so I think it's really cool, right, that they're just as in love with this idea of art and putting this up at games as we are, right? And the time that goes into it is not easy. And then we have to work around their schedules because these are people that do this for a living, right? And if we take time out of their day, we're taking essentially money out of their pockets, right? When they could be working on things that they produce on a regular basis. And then, after the tracing, it goes into painting some of this, which the volunteers that's what they're heavily invested in is, or at least most of their time is heavily invested in painting, filling in a lot of the tracing. And then later on comes in, Luis, when he focuses on some of the more detailed areas that we obviously can't do, or some of us can't, right? So that's essentially the gist of the TIFO. And then from there, whether we need to cut it out or not, what we need to put like the grommets around it and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of little pieces that go into it. And then of course the netting process of getting it on the net for the stadium to pull up and making sure that, things like we proportion the weight, even when you raise that TIFO, because if you put too much weight on one side, it'll rip on the other. And so, or, you know, just different things that go into it. But I mean, the time and the effort that goes into this is a lot. And I'm just really thankful that, you know, as the soccer community, we've been able to come together to make something like this happen.
Tony, I think the TIFO could almost epitomize what's made this journey so special. Again, it shows us all the preparation, all the selfless planning and time, the commitment, the inspiration from so many different directions, but kind of comes together as something that all of us can relate to when we see it go up there. But on top of it all, it's just a massive undertaking. Finishing the TIFO is one thing, but I know you've been a part of the crew that actually logistically is getting it to the stadium and up. Can you put in perspective just how large these installments have been on the first 3 occasions so far?
Yeah, well, I mean, Gaby had to buy a new truck, I think, just to store the TIFO and bring it back from the warehouse. But, you know, I think that's the really big part about this is that, you know, there's thousands of hours of effort going into this, which we're really going to see, you're going to see for 2 or 3 minutes, right? But the impact of those 2 to 3 minutes, you know, might inspire another artist or might have someone pick up a soccer ball or might get a little more attention on Austin FC. So I think, you know, the undertaking of that, I don't think people realize how much work goes into that part. Except for maybe in our community, because there's probably what 50 or 60 people that help hoist it, but there's probably 1,000 people in that stadium that had some part in that. And you know, that's just really, I think, why it's going to keep living on for a very long time.
Now, if your triceps can handle it, I'd be okay with that one from the opener being raised each and every home match. Again, it is beautiful and it certainly seems timeless, but we certainly look forward to the next installment that you all have down the road. Landon, again, you get to kind of be an ambassador in a way as a podcast host, hearing from your listeners, folks you may not have met in person, although I know you are gradually meeting more and more of your listeners for the first time. What is something we might be taking for granted in terms of what has made all of this work over the past anywhere from 1 to 3 years now?
Oh, man. I think Austin was like ready for a soccer team, but having been there from so early on to see what the community around it did to really promote it and build this team out, I think that's a little bit underrated in kind of the larger picture now. I think people just saw the team like, oh, the team's really successful. And it was like they just imagined that it was always going to be successful, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case. A lot of people have done a ton of work into making that the case. I think the team's marketing department honestly deserves a lot of credit as well. Not every team has all these amazing videos and the jersey launches that have happened. The things that the team's marketing department has done have been really special.
I know certainly one person at Austin FC and Alfredo loves any excuse to go on a road trip. And when you all bring the numbers that you all have, helping take over opponents' stadiums, that means he gets to be along for the ride and certainly appreciates what has grown to be the Verde and Black culture. Gaby, a final question is simply, what advice do you have to future markets, to folks who might want to kind of start up something unique like La Murga de Austin?
Oh man, I think just the want, right, and the effort, because some of this stuff is not easy, and I think if anybody wants to do it, they're gonna make it happen, right? To never forget to be inclusive and to always be kind to others that might not know how to pick up an instrument, because literally the Murga folks that welcomed me with open arms and were super nice at me, even though I was terrible at snare, you know, they made me feel comfortable, and they made me feel like I could come back and continue to practice and to be where I am today, you know, like it's all because of them. And I hope that they do that. And I hope that the other teams that are out there creating a similar Murga or their own thing, right, that they welcome people from all cultures, right? Because it's beautiful to be in Q2 Stadium, or I guess better words, Macala Stadium, you know, American people with accents singing Spanish music, you know, and it's beautiful to hear those accents, and it's almost the other way around, right? Like just to enjoy them, enjoying it as much as we do, and just the vibration that it flows through that stadium. It's worth it. You know, we started practicing like 3, 4, 5 of us in a park on a regular basis, and now we're looking at 100, 150 musicians on a regular basis being a part of this.
And for those who are still intimidated, thinking about picking up an instrument for the first time, La Murga de Austin does consider flag waving as an instrument with just as much sincerity as the drums and all the brass section. And from what I can tell, looking at those who are waving the flags, they do not have a background in rhythmic gymnastics. So it looks like just about anybody can express their passion in a variety of ways with La Murga. Tony, final word for you as a president of a supporters group, and the supporters group who kind of planted the seed for all of this passion along the way. What advice do you have to somebody who's just trying to get the ball rolling in a new market?
I think Landon hit on it earlier. And I think it's something that Los Verdes, La Murga, and Austin Anthem well built, is that the team is kind of a secondary thing, right? You're building a community around soccer and each other. And we were very lucky that the stars aligned for the soccer team to show up. But you kind of have to build it with that being like, if you don't get that, are you in a good spot? Are you helping your community? And I think if you focus on that, you know, the worst thing you can say is you failed at bringing a soccer team while making a better community. And you know, it's maybe a little cheesy, but you know, hey, that's just how it works for us, I think.
Well, it's why I wanted to talk to you all. Notice we didn't really talk about soccer itself this entire time. I think you all have helped steal the headlines. You all have helped grow the game in its own way through all these unique benefits that many perhaps did not anticipate when it was announced officially by the city council vote that Austin FC would be arriving as the 27th franchise. Gaby Navarro, Landon Cotham, Tony Cardone, thank you very much for your time. Hope you get to enjoy the soccer finally for 90 minutes as Austin FC takes on Seattle Sounders. That opening kick is coming up next here on Alt 97.5 FM and on Sirius XM FC.